You're too predictable to keep falling in love with, my girlfriend said before leaving before sunrise and blocking my number everywhere. I never contacted her again. Months later, she accidentally walked into a situation that forced her to watch other women fighting for my attention. You're too predictable to keep falling in love with. She said it the way someone reads a receipt out loud, flat, almost bored, like she was confirming a total she'd already calculated. I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there in the kitchen, holding a mug I hadn't taken a sip from yet, watching her pull her jacket off the back of the chair like she'd been rehearsing this exit for weeks. Maybe she had. Caroline, don't. She didn't even turn around. I've already thought about this more than you have. And that was the part that landed wrong. Because I had been thinking about it. I just hadn't been thinking about ending it. She left before sunrise. I remember the specific shade of dark outside the window. That particular blue-black hour when the city isn't quite awake yet, but it's already stopped being night. Her keys hit the kitchen counter. The door clicked shut with the kind of careful quiet that's somehow louder than a slam. She didn't text to say she got home safe. By the time I checked my phone that morning, I already knew what I'd find. Blocked. Instagram. iMessage. WhatsApp. Email. Not unfollowed. Blocked. There's a difference. Unfollowing is distance. Blocking is a wall with a deadbolt. I sat with that for a long time. At the time, I thought she was just ending a relationship. Months later, I'd understand she'd accidentally set something else in motion entirely. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 34 when this happened. Caroline and I had been together for 2 years and some months. Long enough to have a drawer at each other's places. Short enough that we'd never had a serious conversation about what came next. We lived separately, both in the city, both professionally established, or at least trying to be. I worked in project development for a mid-sized consulting firm. She worked in brand strategy for an agency downtown. We'd met through a mutual friend, dated slowly. Then suddenly, the way things sometimes collapse into momentum without you deciding to let them. For most of those 2 years, I thought we were fine. That was apparently the problem. Looking back, the signs were there early. Not obvious ones. Not the kind you catch in real time. The kind that only makes sense in retrospect, when you're sitting in your apartment alone at 6 in the morning trying to figure out what just happened. About 8 months in, Caroline started making small comments. You always order the same thing. I'd shrug. I liked what I liked. You go to the same gym at the same time every day. I had a routine. It worked. We always do the same things on weekends. We had a rhythm. I thought that was good. None of these felt like criticism at the time. They felt like observations. The kind of things couples notice about each other and mention casually, not weighted with anything larger. I should have asked more questions. I didn't. My best friend Harrison noticed before I did. We had lunch one afternoon, a Thursday, maybe 4 months before the breakup, and somewhere between the food arriving and the check coming, he looked at me and said, "She seems restless lately." I asked what he meant. Last time we all hung out, he said, she kept checking her phone. Not in a distracted way. More like she was waiting for something better to come through. I told him she'd been stressed with work. Harrison didn't push it, but he didn't look convinced either. That wasn't the first warning I'd filed away without really reading. The comparison started sometime around month 10, always framed casually. Madeline's boyfriend surprised her with a trip to Portugal. Just like, randomly booked it. Did you see what Elliot posted? He planned this whole rooftop thing for Alexandra. I'd listen. Sometimes I'd say something like, "That's nice for them." And I meant it genuinely. I wasn't threatened by other couples doing thoughtful things. But I also noticed that these comments always seemed to arrive right after a weekend where nothing particularly dramatic had happened. We'd have a perfectly good Saturday, dinner somewhere solid, a walk, easy conversation, early night. And by Sunday she'd be scrolling through someone else's highlight reel like our evening had already been filed under forgettable. I started wondering what she was actually looking for. I still didn't ask. My coworker Wesley was the one who finally said the word out loud. We were grabbing coffee after a long client review, and I mentioned, offhand, that things had felt a little off at home. He didn't hesitate. Does she get bored easily? I told him I wasn't sure. Some people, he said, swirling his cup, don't actually want a good relationship. They want the feeling of almost losing one. The anxiety, the highs, the making up after something blows up. Without all that, they don't feel anything. I told him that sounded exhausting. It is, he said, for the person they're with. I drove home that afternoon thinking about what he'd said. I still didn't believe it applied to us. There was a dinner in December. Her friends were there, Madeline, a couple I didn't know well, and Caroline's sister Juliana, who I'd always gotten along with. Midway through the meal, someone asked how we'd been lately. Caroline smiled and said, "Good. You know, same as always." The way she said it, same as always, like it was an apology. Juliana caught my eye across the table for just a second. A brief, unreadable look. Then she turned back to her drink. I filed that away too. January was quiet. Too quiet, I understood later. Caroline stopped bringing up future plans, trips, events, even just weekend suggestions. She'd started going out more with Madeline on Friday nights, coming home later, offering less detail when I asked how it went. Not suspicious behavior exactly, just withdrawal. The slow removal of investment. So gradual you almost don't notice until the balance is already gone. I tried a few things. Booked a reservation at a restaurant she'd mentioned once. She said it was nice. Suggested a weekend out of the city. She said, maybe, and then didn't bring it up again. I planned a low-key evening at home. Her favorite kind of night, or what I thought was her favorite kind of night. She spent most of it on her phone. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "I'm just tired." I believed her. Looking back, I think she'd already made the decision by February. The leaving had already happened emotionally. The physical part, the keys, the door, the sunrise, that was just the formal announcement. There was one conversation, maybe 3 weeks before the end, where she turned to me in the middle of nothing and said, "Don't you ever just want something to change?" I asked what she meant. "I don't know," she said. "Something. Anything." "Like what though?" She shrugged. "That's kind of the point. If you have to ask, you don't get it." I stayed with that for a moment. "Are you unhappy?" "I'm not unhappy." "Then what are you?" She looked out the window for a long time. "Underwhelmed." I replayed that word for weeks afterward. Underwhelmed. Not hurt. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Underwhelmed. Like I was a meal that had arrived lukewarm. Like 2 years of showing up, of being consistent, of building something steady, had all just sort of failed to impress her. And I think that's the moment I finally understood. It wasn't about what I'd done or hadn't done. It wasn't about chemistry fading or compatibility breaking down. It was about what she actually wanted. She wanted the feeling of standing at the edge of something. The electricity of not quite knowing. The high of a relationship that kept surprising her, not with kindness or reliability, but with instability. With emotional weather she couldn't predict. I couldn't give her that. Not because I wasn't capable of it. Because I didn't want to be that. She left on a Tuesday morning in March, before 6 a.m. I didn't hear the whole thing, just the jacket, the keys, the door. By 7, I'd confirmed what I already suspected. Blocked everywhere. No note. No final message. No last call. Just the insult and then the wall. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about texting from a different number. I thought about reaching out through a mutual friend. I thought about all the things I could have done differently. And then I thought about what she'd said. "You're too predictable to keep falling in love with." I put my phone face down on the table. And I didn't reach out. Not that day. Not ever. That was the decision that changed everything. Not dramatically. Not immediately. But quietly, the way most things that matter actually happen. The first few weeks were just noise. The kind of low-grade disorientation that comes from losing a routine you didn't realize you'd built around another person. I'd reach for my phone in the morning out of habit. Notice I had no reason to. Put it back. Harrison came over one night with food and no agenda. He didn't ask me to talk through it. Didn't offer analysis. Just sat there on my couch watching something neither of us were paying attention to. And that was enough. "You doing okay?" he asked once. "Not particularly." Yeah. That was the whole conversation. I needed that more than any advice he could have given me. I went back to work with a focus I hadn't had in months. I hadn't realized how much mental space the relationship had been occupying. Not even the good parts, just the management of it. The recalibrating. The quiet anxiety of knowing something wasn't quite right and not being able to fix it. That space was gone now. I filled it. My firm had been in early conversations with a potential partner, a logistics company looking to restructure its operational consulting arm. I threw myself into the preliminary work. Long nights, detailed proposals, the kind of focus that either kills a deal or makes it. My director, Brooks, noticed within the first 2 weeks. "Whatever's going on with you," he said after a particularly good client presentation. "Keep going." I almost laughed. Around that same time, I reconnected with Nathaniel. We'd met 3 years earlier at an industry conference. Briefly, the way you meet 40 people in 2 days, and had stayed loosely in touch over LinkedIn. But we'd never actually worked together. He reached out in April, asking if I had time for coffee. He was building something new, a boutique operational advisory firm, working specifically with mid-market companies in transition. He wanted to talk about whether there was any appetite for collaboration. We met on a Wednesday morning. We talked for 2.5 hours. By the end of it, we'd sketched the rough outline of something that felt real. I drove back to my office thinking about Caroline's word again. Underwhelmed. I was anything but. Professionally, the next 3 months were the most active of my career. The deal with the logistics company closed in May. It was the largest engagement our team had brought in that quarter, and my name was on most of the foundational work. Brooks mentioned me by name in a company-wide meeting. I didn't make anything of it publicly, but privately, I noticed how different it felt to be recognized for something I'd genuinely earned. Not performed, not chased, just built. Nathaniel and I formalized our consulting arrangement in June. Our first shared client came through a referral from Mason, a mentor I'd worked with early in my career who'd recently moved into a senior advisory role at a private equity firm. He sent us a company that needed full structural redesign. We were in over our heads for exactly 1 week. Then we figured it out. The social shift happened gradually and without any planning. I'd been turning down invitations for most of my relationship with Caroline, not consciously, just defaulting to quieter weekends, smaller circles. She'd preferred it that way, or at least that's what I'd assumed. Without that pull toward staying in, I started saying yes more. Harrison had a group of friends I'd met only a few times. I started showing up. A regular Thursday night thing. Rotating spots, rotating conversations, always the same core of genuinely interesting people. One of them was Sawyer, who ran event programming for a nonprofit arts organization. Another was Claire, who I'd worked with briefly at a previous firm and lost touch with. Another was a woman named Natalie who did marketing strategy for a regional media company and had approximately no filter and an opinion on everything, which I found unexpectedly refreshing. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to fill anything. I was just present in a way I hadn't been in a long time. Women started noticing. I want to be careful about how I say this, because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a montage. It wasn't a sudden transformation where I became someone different. It was more like, when you're genuinely focused on your own life and genuinely at ease in your own skin, something in your presence shifts. People pick up on it, especially people who are paying attention. Natalie made it obvious first. She started showing up early to Thursdays, finding reasons to be in the same corner of whatever room we were in. I noticed but didn't act on it immediately. I wasn't in a rush. A client named Evelyn, who ran a mid-sized consumer goods company we'd been brought in to work with, invited me to a panel dinner after we wrapped our engagement. The invitation was professional. The follow-up text was less so. Harper, an industry contact I'd known for years, suddenly started finding reasons to reach out. I wasn't used to this. Not because I'd been invisible before, but because I'd been taken, and then I'd been knocked flat, and now apparently I was something else entirely. I didn't talk to Caroline. I want to be clear about that. Not once. No mutual friend updates. No social media surveillance. No slow investigation of what she was up to or who she was seeing. I'd made peace with the ending. It wasn't comfortable peace, not at first, but it was real. I'd understood, eventually, that she hadn't been wrong about who I was. She'd been wrong about what that meant. Predictable isn't the same as boring. Consistent isn't the same as stagnant. I knew that. I'd always known it. I just needed to stop being around someone who confused the two. Mutual friend Elliot called me in late July. He and Alexandra were engaged. They were throwing a celebration dinner, not a formal engagement party, just a gathering at a private room in a restaurant downtown. Intimate. 40 or 50 people. I was on the list. He mentioned, offhand, that the invite had gone wide. Mutual friends, colleagues, some family. The usual mix for their circle. I said I'd be there. He said, I should mention, Caroline will probably be there too. Alexandra's known her since college. I thought about it for a second. That's fine, I said. And I meant it. The night of the dinner, I drove over with Harrison and his girlfriend, Mara. I wasn't anxious. I'd noticed that about myself recently. The baseline anxiety that had been present for most of the final months with Caroline was just gone. Not suppressed. Gone. Like it had dissolved without my permission while I was busy doing other things. The venue was warm. Good energy. Elliot had picked well. Long tables, candlelight, the kind of room that makes people lean in and actually talk to each other. I found Elliot immediately, congratulated him, shook hands with people I knew and introduced myself to people I didn't. Nathaniel was there. We had a mutual connection to Elliot through a previous project. Sawyer was there too, which surprised me. Turns out she'd done event work for Alexandra's foundation. I was in the middle of a conversation with Nathaniel and a conference host named Hudson when I felt the shift in the room. I didn't see her walk in, but I knew she had. I found out later that Caroline had hesitated at the door. Madeline told Juliana, who told no one but accidentally said something to Alexandra, who mentioned it to Elliot, who eventually told Harrison. Apparently Caroline had seen my car in the lot and nearly turned around. She hadn't known I'd be there. She came in anyway. I want to be honest about how I handled the next hour. I didn't perform. I wasn't louder than usual. I didn't dress differently than I would have for any other dinner. I didn't position myself for visibility or engineer moments of social proof. I was just there, talking to Nathaniel about a new project we were considering, catching up with Claire, who'd recently moved firms and was navigating a complicated transition, having a genuinely funny conversation with Natalie, who'd arrived with a story about a client meeting that had gone spectacularly sideways. At some point, Evelyn, who I genuinely hadn't expected to be there, apparently connected to Alexandra through a charity board, came over and touched my arm to get my attention. We talked for a while. Then Harper appeared from somewhere and joined the conversation, and Natalie drifted back. I was standing in a small cluster of women who were, I became gradually aware, each, in their own way, competing for conversational real estate. It wasn't staged. It wasn't coordinated. It was just what it was. I saw Caroline across the room. She was standing with Madeline near the far end of the second table. She was watching, not staring, not obviously, the way someone looks at something they're trying to appear uninterested in. I held her gaze for exactly 1 second, gave a brief, polite nod, then turned back to the conversation. The dinner went long. Toasts, then dessert, then the kind of lingering that happens when people are genuinely enjoying themselves and no one wants to be the first to leave. Harrison found me near the end of the night. "You see her?" he asked quietly. "Yeah." "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah." He studied my face for a moment, looking for the thing I might be hiding. He didn't find it, because it wasn't there. I was stepping outside for some air when Juliana found me, Caroline's sister. We'd always gotten along. She was direct in a way I appreciated, and she'd never been theatrical about the breakup the way some mutual adjacents had been. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She stood next to me on the sidewalk for a second, looking out at the street. "She's not doing great," she said. Not mean, not proud about it, just stating a fact. I nodded. "The last few months have been, she keeps looking for something and not finding it." She paused. I think she thought things would be more exciting. After, I didn't say anything. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel good," she added. "I know. I just thought you should know that whatever happened, you didn't do anything wrong." She wanted something that doesn't really exist, and now she's figuring out that it doesn't exist. I looked at her. "Thank you for saying that." She nodded and went back inside. I found out later, through a chain of conversations I wasn't part of, some of what Caroline had said after the dinner. She'd told Madeline that she hadn't expected me to seem that settled. That was the word she'd used. Settled. Not successful. Not impressive. Not any of the external things. Settled. Like I had found a frequency she didn't expect me to find without her. She'd told Juliana, apparently, that watching those women talk to me had felt strange. Not because of jealousy, she apparently said. More because I remembered that he always had that. That thing that makes people want to be around him. I just stopped seeing it. Madeline had said something about reaching out to me. Caroline had said, "I can't." Not because she was too proud. Because she understood, somewhere past the pride, that there was no version of that conversation she could have that would give her what she was looking for. She had walked away from stability looking for fire. She'd found sparks. Brief, bright, gone. I'm not going to tell you I haven't thought about her since that night. That would be a lie, and I don't think it serves either of us. I've thought about her. Not with longing. Not with anger. With something more like clarity. I understand now, in a way I couldn't while I was in it, that some people aren't looking for a partner. They're looking for a feeling. And the feeling they're chasing doesn't survive familiarity. It requires uncertainty. It requires the constant possibility of loss. I'm not that. I was never going to be that. And I spent a long time, not years, but long enough, quietly doubting whether being exactly who I am was somehow insufficient. The dinner answered that question. Not because of the women. Not because of the attention. Not because Caroline watched and felt something. But because I stood in that room, in a life I'd built through a long, quiet stretch of just continuing to show up, and I felt like myself. Fully, unmistakably, for the first time in a long time. Nathaniel and I signed our second major client in September. Brooks offered me a senior role at the firm, larger scope, more authority, different title. I took it. Harrison and Mara got engaged the following spring. I was his best man. I gave a speech I actually meant. Natalie and I started something slow and unforced that I'm not going to narrate in detail, because some things deserve to develop without an audience. What I'll say is this. She calls me predictable sometimes, always with a grin, like it's the best possible thing. Caroline got a new job, I heard eventually. New city, I think. I hope she found what she was looking for. I mean that without irony and without bitterness. She wasn't wrong to want something. She was just wrong about where it was. She called what I was a flaw. Steady, reliable, consistent. She said I was too predictable to keep falling in love with. She wasn't wrong about what I was. She was wrong about what it was worth. She spent months looking for excitement. By the time she found me in that room, surrounded by people who'd sought me out, in a life that had quietly refused to collapse without her, she finally understood. She hadn't left boring. She had left peace. And some people only understand the value of peace once they've spent long enough without it.